This notion of free will, can anyone actually explain what it is? Can anyone actually give a good definition of it? We all feel like we have free will and like we author our thoughts and actions, and that surely we must have some control over our lives, right? Inspired by a conversation I had with some friends to make this video, I did a fair bit of research because I want people to actually think about the notion of free will. Some people might get booty tickled thinking this is what I personally believe, which, like, if it is or isn't,
that's my opinion!
This is just what I could research mixed in with what I already knew. If you've taken a philosophy class or spent a lot of time on Reddit, this probably isn't new to you. But for those of you who are new, I will be going over determinism. Determinism is the philosophical theory that free will doesn't exist and that everything is predetermined, hence the word determinism. You can think of it as you can decide you don't like bitter foods or country music, but you cannot decide to decide.
You do not know where your decisions come from. They pop up like hiccups.
If that's confusing, it's totally okay. We're going to break it down further. Just work with me. But to go back to our original question of what is free will, believe it or not, there is a lot of contention about the definition. But we're going to have to pick one or maybe two definitions to work with for the sake of this video. So I just went with the first one that popped up on Google, as well as the one I could get off of Merriam-Webster. Notice the Merriam-Webster definition mentions prior causes, and how Google's definition mentions necessity or fate. Well, that's important as all hell, and we will get around to it. If you're new to philosophy, that's okay. There are many different schools of thought, even within determinism, but we're going to go with what's called hard determinism, the idea that every single thing down to the atom is predetermined. So in philosophy, things need to be put in the proper format called a syllogism, which usually looks something like this. There are a few premises that lead to a conclusion. For example, all golden retrievers are dogs. All golden retrievers have golden hair. Therefore, all dogs with golden hair are golden retrievers. As stupid simple as this might seem, it's used for just about every philosophical proof. Some can even be 50 different premises that come together for one conclusion. And it helps you think in this way because it helps you separate what is true from what you'd like to be true. Notice how although premise 1 and 2 are correct, the conclusion is not. It's simple things like this that help separate truth from non-truth. So moving forward, for the example of determinism, we will use 5 different premises that boil down to one conclusion. Starting with premise 1, the universe is governed by the laws of physics. The thing about physics is even if something can't be readily explained, it always adapts. For example, non-Newtonian fluids. They don't seem to make sense, but upon further inspection, they do actually follow the laws of physics. It just takes a more refined approach to figure out exactly how they work. It's not that they break the laws of physics. The laws of physics will simply just dive deeper, and using the scientific method, they will adjust and eventually figure out what is causing non-Newtonian fluids to act the way they do. Anyway, premise 2. All causes have an effect. For example, Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Premise 3. Present events happen because of earlier events in accordance with the laws of physics. Premise 4. My choices and decisions are events in the universe. Premise 5. They, events in the universe, therefore happen as they do because of earlier events. Events even before my birth, in accordance with the laws of physics. And the conclusion is, I therefore have no free will. To put it even more simply, everything is a result of what came before. Therefore, all action is determined by what came before it. And the conclusion is, therefore, there is no free will. Feel free to take all the time you need to parse through it, process it. That's the thing with philosophy. If there's something you don't agree with, you can just pick out a specific premise and simply just try to debunk it. Remember those highlights about the free will definition from earlier? How the Merriam-Webster definition mentions prior causes, and how Google's definition mentions necessity or fate? Well, based on these 6 points, those notions of free will fall apart because it means everything happens because of prior causes. Google's definition is a bit trickier because technically we don't have infinite free will, or else we would be gods. Our free will is limited by simple things like our bodies and generally acceptable behavior, as well as our legal system. This can be better illustrated using an air hockey table. When you play air hockey, you can calculate in your head how hard to hit the puck and at what angle to get a goal. You create a cause, and as a result, there's an effect. As long as you hit the puck the same way every time, the same result will happen every single time. If we take it a step further and use a pool table, before someone hits the cue ball to separate all the others, it might be difficult to imagine where every other ball might go, but depending on what angle, what force, and the friction of the hit, we can calculate exactly where every ball would go, much in the same way we can calculate how far and where a ball will land based on some variables. We can do this every time with a pool table, from any angle with different degrees of force being applied to any ball, and always determine where it will end up. This is a very simple cause and effect relationship. It is also deterministic. If you were to replace those cue balls with atoms, and instead of you striking the balls, it's either God or the Big Bang that sets them into motion, it's more or less a simplified version of what's happening in our universe. It's just one massive, massive game of pool, with pool balls more or less being atoms influenced by gravity, electromagnetism, and so forth. Now, to step back, what evidence do we have that free will exists? To be fair and play devil's advocate, in order to make a free will decision, you would need to be aware of everything influencing your actions, including environmental factors, your precise mood, the influence of other people, past experiences, genetics, the list goes on. Secondly, you would need to be in complete control of all those factors. In essence, you'd have a purely original thought without any cause. If you could have a purely original thought or decision from scratch, that could be free will, one that had no cause and simply appeared from your consciousness. You essentially cannot make decisions from scratch because the thing that causes you to make a decision from scratch was already decided and had its own cause that you couldn't control, and its result was you trying to have your own 100% original thought from scratch that wasn't part of some chain of events. Your decision to wear blue or eat cereal for breakfast stands to reason that those decisions were caused by any number of actions that occurred before it. No present event cannot be caused without being caused by another previous event. Although some debate that even if the thought appeared completely from scratch or randomly, that doesn't mean you decided it, nor that you even wanted it. Just because an idea comes from no cause does not mean that you made it happen, or that you were in control, which is an entirely different video. So far, based on the evidence, the best bet for there being free will would be in quantum physics, I would argue, where things seemingly function randomly and are not predetermined. If we can find where our thoughts come from, we might have some insight to support a free will. Thoughts appear to come out of nowhere, so maybe diving deeper into exactly how we come up with thoughts could shed some light on it. Generally speaking, this is hard for many people to wrap their minds around, and it makes sense because it just feels so strongly that we are free and that you did in fact decide to eat sushi for lunch. And that decision wasn't the total sum of a bunch of other previous causes which made you get hungry. Think of sushi, order it, and then consume it. To paraphrase Sam Harris's book on free will, mental states are brain states, and brain states are biological states, and biological states are physical states. And as we have gone over it, the physical world is governed by physics, which is deterministic. Our thoughts and actions have all sorts of invisible causes that we aren't always aware of either. So when we do something, we don't fully realize all the causes that went into causing the effect. For example, evidence shows the color red makes you hungry. Maybe you passed by a red car, and maybe you wore red today, and as it caused you to get hungry, you passed by a sushi restaurant, which led you to get sushi for lunch. The interesting thing is, if determinism is true, then kind of like an interesting quirk, it would kind of mean it kind of wanted to be discovered, since we don't really get to decide any of our thoughts and actions. Decisions are basically the right combination of brain stuff combined in just the right way through a long chain of reactions that happen long before our birth to make us decide a thing. If you want to dive deeper into this, I highly recommend reading Sam Harris's book on free will from the perspective of neuroscience. It's really short and it should take you maybe a day or two to finish. If you enjoyed this video, or if your brain hurts, feel free to like, leave a comment. It definitely does help with the algorithm. I'll be bringing out more videos soon. Thanks.